Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hello, my name is Billy Diamond, and welcome to another episode of the Branding for Entertainers podcast. I apologize. I find myself doing that quite a bit lately because I end up skipping monthly episodes. Let me tell you, my heart intent is really to get that stuff out there to you, but sometimes it is not feasible because of being busy. So I do apologize. If this was my full-time gig, I'd have no excuse, but I also have been traveling, and I've had an opportunity to travel clear across the country from East Coast clear to Seattle, Washington, and it was a great trip, especially after COVID, and just to get away and see America. It was just phenomenal. If you've never traveled across America by car, you gotta do it at least once in your lifetime. It's fantastic. Let's talk about today's guest. Oh man, she's a comedian from just south of Seattle, Washington, who was gracious enough to just sit down with me in her car, I might add. And it was kind of like Jerry Seinfeld's Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, if you ever saw that. I think it was on Netflix or one of those things. Anyhow, Sharon was great because she took time to travel to me. We sat in her car. So this is a very raw type of interview, and I apologize that professionally speaking, it isn't all that. You're going to hear a lot of background noise coming from her air conditioning because when we got back to Seattle that particular day, unprecedented for Seattle, but it was 105 degrees. So, you know what? It was either a professional recorded audio track or we were cool and nice and comfortable in her car. So anyway, I do have to say that this is just a great interview with Sharon. She's fantastic. She's been a comedian for over 16 years now, and she has hit at least 40 comedy clubs across the United States, and she's also been a headliner. And in this particular episode, we're really just going to hit on the front end of entertainment, you know, the part of being on stage. But I promise you this, we will cover some branding stuff because that is so important, and that is what this podcast is actually all about, right? So we will be doing that. We'll talk with Sharon a little bit about branding and how she has branded herself, or maybe how she has not branded herself, but you'll want to stay tuned and take a listen. This is my great interview with Sharon Lacey. Well, first of all, thank you for joining me on the podcast.
I'm happy to be here.
And you are actually, I had to get some diversity in there. You're my first female guest.
Well, thank you.
So thank you. I guess congratulations. I'm not sure. We'll see how the podcast turns out, I guess, first. So do you call yourself a comedian, a comic? You do a lot of things. So just in general, how do you sum up your title?
Right. Well, you're right. I do a lot of different things. And I am a stand-up comic. I'm also a motivational humorist, which means I do a lot of motivational speaking with tons of humor in it. And I also call myself a corporate comedian.
Do you have a favorite market that you like to perform in?
I guess my favorite, if I could choose anything, I would choose to be performing in a huge concert hall with 5,000 guests who expect funny and clean, smart, clean comedy. That would be my
great.
But that's very hard to come by.
Yeah. Let me ask you this: you said clean comedy, so you have a very clean act, and even the humor in your motivational shows, very clean, and that's obviously something that came about because of values and things like that, right?
Well, it came about because initially, my degree's in radio television, and I was a radio DJ for a while, then a television news producer, and I did just about every job there is to do in TV. I put myself through college, working all kinds of minimum wage jobs. And once I got to where I thought I wanted to be, which was a television news producer, I discovered that's not what I really wanted to do with life. And I had to figure out, what am I going to do? Or I don't have to go back and put myself through college again. I don't have to start at the bottom again, working every weekend, every holiday, And someone said, well, why don't you be a teacher? no, what else could I do? And then I looked into it a little more, and it turned out that fit all my criteria, and I got accepted into this program where you just student taught all year. You didn't have to take a ton of extra classes, and if you did well, you got the qualifications, and I did well, and I got a job immediately. Wow. Now, that is not why someone should become a teacher. You should become a teacher because I believe the children are our future, you know. But it turned out that was the perfect job for me. I loved it. I loved my students. I was 6th grade most of the time, sometimes 7th and 8th grade. And I applied a lot of the television and radio stuff that I did into the classroom, so they got to make TV shows, and they wrote and produced movies and all that kind of stuff. But what I'm getting to answer your question is I was a teacher for 23 years. And as a teacher, you can't have foul language or really even foul thoughts. So then I decided to become a comedian, and I'm still clean. And when you're a beginning comedian, you're performing in dive bars. No one wants to hear some clean teacher. You get up there and the first thing they say, show me your tits, you know. So I had to start writing filthy material. And I could get as filthy as anybody. And it was fun. It was liberating. After 23 years, it was fun.
Felt stifled. Now all of a sudden, wow.
Right. Whoa. And the audiences were like, oh, wow, I wish you were my teacher. You know, thinking that's how I was as a teacher. I wasn't. I soon discovered that if you actually want to go somewhere in comedy, if you want to get good, well-paying jobs, you better not be doing the F word every other sentence.
Right. Yeah, it's a little hard to do clean corporate work and some motivational stuff at schools, especially, right?
Yeah.
But I know entertainers that do that. They'll cross over.
Yeah, so now I'm able to do both. If I'm in a venue that obviously requires a little bit racier material, I can do that. Unlike a lot of
just a real quick
can't switch over to
interjection
clean.
within this
They're
particular
stuck.
podcast episode.
Whereas I
and
get
I
tons
don't
of
want to
work.
say that Sharon is wrong in doing what she is doing because, hey, at the end of the day, if you're working, you are working. But my belief personally is it's really hard to go from raunchy to doing clean family shows. Do I know people that are doing it? Well, she's doing it. I know other clients that are doing it. But I guess my cautionary thing would be this, and this is a great observation as you grow your brand. It's really, really important. Depending upon your market, and those are the key factors, depending upon your market, okay, it's really important that you understand where you're at and where you want to go with your career. So step back. Don't be afraid to step back and challenge that and say, well, am I only taking this raunchy gig because fill in the blank? Or am I only taking this family gig because of blank? Only you can answer that. And my belief is a little bit different. And I won't say that my belief is jaded, but I believe that my belief is accurate in that you can really kill your market if you're not careful. Anyway, Sharon's doing it, and she's doing what she loves to do, and she's working.
Because I can
Let's
go
get back
clean.
into the episode.
Mhm.
And probably if you had to pay your living just comedy clubs, it might be a little tough, right?
Unless you're Ellen
Right,
DeGeneres or
right,
Wanda Sykes or somebody really well known.
Right.
You'll be lucky if you break even.
Right, yeah. Well, let's talk about the story a little bit more of, so you explained that you decided you wanted to be a comedian. What triggered that?
Two things triggered it. One, when I was in 5th grade, my teacher suggested that I perform a comic monologue, and I did. I got a lot of laughs, and so then I performed it in public elsewhere, got a lot of laughs, performed at the Washington State Fair, and I got first place.
Wow.
And then they took my trophy away from me the next day because I was only, I think, 10 years old, and you had to be at least 12 to enter the contest.
Oh, my God. What a crusher.
So
That'd
that
be
was
devastating.
I know. Well, I knew I'd won, so that was fine. But and then life got in the way, and I never thought about comedy again. Now, cut ahead another 40 years. I'm now 50 years old, and my grandmother has Alzheimer's. My grandmother dies of Alzheimer's at age 91.
Wow.
Then her daughter, my mom, at 70, began showing signs of Alzheimer's.
Oh, wow.
And at 83, she didn't know who I was. And then my dad had it. Now, Grandma, Mom, and Dad, I'm thinking I'm probably next.
Yeah, you're next in line, huh?
Right. And I'd better do everything I ever wanted to do while I still have a brain to do it with. And that's what I thought, I love teaching. I've won national awards for my teaching.
Oh, wow.
But I've always wanted to try that stand-up comedy. And I'd never been to a live comedy show. I'd never even been to an open mic, because open mics were held in smoky bars, and I just didn't go to smoky bars as a teacher, But I decided I would try it.
You remember that first time stepping on stage?
I do remember that first time very clearly. I begged my husband to go with me, because he never goes with me anywhere, and I begged him, and I went there, and as I was sitting there watching all these young guys in their 20s, because that's what they mostly were, young guys in their 20s going up on stage one by one, I'm thinking, I think I can do that. I think I can. I know the F word. I'm going to go sign up. I started to get up, and my husband pulled me back down. He just yanked me by the arm and said, "Don't do it, Sharon. You'll just embarrass yourself. Don't do it." But I pulled away, and I went over, and I signed up. I was number 8 on the list. By the time I got back to my seat, number 6 was up, and my hands were just shaking.
Sure.
And then number 7 got up, and my legs were shaking. And then they called my name, and every inch of my body was shaking. But I got up there. People go, "Well, why were you scared? You taught middle school." Yeah, but my students had to laugh at my jokes.
Right,
They relied on me for a grade.
They were your captive audience.
Yeah,
Right.
It was different getting in front of an audience of adults. And I got up there, and the light was so bright I couldn't see a thing. And I did a couple minutes of what I had planned and heard a few chuckles. And I went to sit back down, and I thought my husband would be waiting for me with a big high five. High five! Here's how he was waiting for me. His head's down, slumped in his seat. It's probably because of the joke I told was about his colonoscopy. But
well, that could be it.
That could be. But that was it. After that night, I just kept going back to any open mic I could find anywhere, any night of the week. I lived in Portland, and I would drive 3.5 hours, 4 hours up to the Seattle Comedy Underground to do their open mic on a Monday night.
Wow.
They even gave me an extra minute. They gave me 4 minutes instead of 3 because they knew I'd driven up. And then I'd drive back home that night and teach school the next day. And 5 months in, I got my first paid job.
That's pretty impressive.
It
actually,
is. I
for
got
5
paid.
months in.
No kidding.
Right?
My first, I got paid $50 to drive the headliner 10 hours to his gig.
Technically, your first paid gig, right?
Gas money. But he let me open for him.
That's awesome.
He and the feature act even shared a room so I could have a hotel room. That was so nice of them.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so I never looked back. That was, I'll go ahead and say it. That was 16 years ago when I first started comedy. And since then, I've headlined in 40 clubs across America, 2 tours of Iraq and Kuwait for our troops, and 4 comedy tours of Uganda, of Africa. Yeah.
Wow. Do you self-manage, or you have
I
agents?
self-manage.
Really?
I figured
That's
I would
great.
work.
So
I
you're
would
hustling.
work. Yeah. Oh, I'd
You're
work
really
harder
hustling.
for myself than anybody would work for me, and then I don't owe anybody anything.
That's true. Keep that extra 15 or 20% in your pocket.
And they never tell you how much they're actually keeping.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. What? You don't trust agents? Really? I have listeners that some of them they're either weekend warriors or they're just part-timers. Mm-hmm. And some of them really want to go full-time. You obviously made that transition from teaching to doing it. And I think one of the biggest things that I've learned over the years is that fear will hold you back. Mm-hmm. It'll really hold you back. And it sounds to me like you were at a point that you said, given the Alzheimer's with your grandmother.
And my mom and
your
my
mother.
Dad, yeah.
And your dad. So with that, you said, I want to live life. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably a really great thing for even listeners to hear. Only you know how successful you want to be as an entertainer. Mm-hmm. So maybe some of them are comfortable in their element of, maybe doing a full-time gig and doing shows here and there. So I have magicians and ventriloquists, comedians, but they just need some encouragement. And I think your story's great so far just because you're doing it, you're living it, and you're doing it full-time in 16 years.
Yeah.
And if you stop and think, I mean, that is a long time, but it's really not a long time, right?
Yeah. In fact, I was headlining in 3 years, which is really, that makes a lot of other comics mad because most comics feel you shouldn't even you have no business calling yourself a headliner without at least a minimum of 5 years, experience. But you see, I was not just doing this as a hobby, not just going out to the Sunday night open mic. I was every night working on my material while also teaching every night, going everywhere that I could to improve and doing everything I could to work on my craft.
And I think the comedy club open mics are a really good thing to try new material, see what works, what doesn't work, have the audience hand stuff back to you and maybe not like you even, right?
Yeah.
I would think in that kind of environment, you're getting your chops in probably a very short amount of time.
Yeah.
And boy, it takes a brave person to do that, to step on stage not knowing if material is going to work.
Right.
Now, I look at it from a magic and a magician standpoint because that's what I do. There's times where a trick might fail, but more likely it's going to succeed. It's a little bit different. But if you tell a bad joke, boo, hiss, right?
Yeah.
You're going to get that. What gave you the chops and the confidence just to say, I'm going to do it? Is there any point that you felt like, maybe I'm not cut out for this?
Yeah. I questioned myself as far as, am I funny? I felt like I wasn't funny. I was just willing to get up there and try. And some people will say, well, if you don't think you're funny, how can you expect your audience to think you're funny? And you shouldn't even set foot on that stage. Yeah. How dare you? But it's something that I really wanted to work on and improve at. One time I got off stage and I was just all hangdog because I knew I'd bombed and I hadn't done well. But I was just all down. And one of the other local comics said, okay, so now what are you going to do? You're going to sit here and be all, oh, I'm so sad I didn't. Or are you going to take a minute and look at your set and how are you going to learn from it?
Sure.
What can you learn from bombing?
Sure. Everybody has an off night.
Yeah.
Right? But pick yourself back up.
And I've been very lucky. I've only gotten heckled maybe 3 times in my entire comedy career. Maybe it's because I look nice, like I'm too nice to heckle. I know I was about 3 years in, and I was featuring in Toledo, Ohio at a club called Connections. And I think it was a 4-night gig. Shane Moss was the headliner. And the first 3 nights, everything went great. Lots of laughs. The opener got lots of laughs. The guest set got a lot of laughs. And then I went on. I got a lot of laughs. And, of course, Shane did. He's hilarious. But on the Saturday night, I think it was, the opener got nothing. Crickets.
Wow.
And then the guest set got nothing. Crickets. And so me, being only 3 years in, I thought, all right, I'm going to go up there and show them how it's done. Because I always kill with my first 5 minutes. And I got up there.
Tried and true tested material.
Oh,
right?
Yeah. So, I'm going to show them what it's like to get an audience to laugh. And they didn't laugh. My best material was not working right off the bat. And then I made a crucial error. Then, as if a crucial error wasn't already thinking I was going to show them how it's done. Okay, then I made my second crucial error. I said, hey, you guys, it's Saturday night. I thought you came here to laugh. And some guy in the back said, yeah, we thought you'd be funny.
Wow. How would you feel if that happened to you? Hey, maybe it has happened to you. I personally think that we have all died on stage at times. And if you haven't, well, you're not doing enough shows. I'm going to tell you that right now. Well, listen, we're going to take a really quick break, but when we come back, we're going to hear about how Sharon recovered, but also a little bit more of her story, and then we're also going to talk about branding. So stay with us. The pandemic has affected a lot of entertainers since its start in 2020, and some entertainers have simply given up hope, while many others were actually forced to go get a 9-to-5 job just so they can make an income and make ends meet, and perhaps this was you. Well, I have some good news though, that even in spite of the recent Delta variant, many entertainers, they're actually back to work and doing live events once again, and that's great. And the ones that actually gave up and quit have little to no desire to come back to an industry that was actually hit so hard. Now, what does this mean for you? Well, if you've ever wondered what it would feel like to perform in your dream market, or perhaps you want to be a full-time entertainer, well, now is the perfect chance. It's the perfect time. And I want to talk about it. I offer a free 30-minute breakthrough session, and we can do that online or on the phone. Now, surprisingly, many entertainers, and I'm talking about even some professionals, are still uncertain what they need to do when it comes to understanding their brand and the direction or even the market that they're trying to head to. All you have to do to take advantage of this free session is to go over to the brandingentertainers.com website. Again, that's brandingentertainers.com, and just click on the big blue button that says Get Help with My Brand. You can't miss it. And I absolutely look forward to helping and serving you. And now, let's get back to our episode with Sharon Lacey, where when we last left, somebody from the audience was heckling her and said, well, we thought you were going to be funny. So I have to ask you, I mean, that is such an insult. I mean, when we go to a car mechanic or we go to our doctor, we don't put them down. And somehow when we're on stage, it seems like people are allowed to do that to us, or they can insult us. So what did you do with that?
It was my first time being heckled. And so the audience were like, oh! And they're waiting for my big comeback, to grind him down. And I stopped and I said, you know, I've been doing this for 3 years and I've always wondered what it was like to get heckled. And now I know. It doesn't feel good at all. So anyway, and then I just went into my next joke because that was all I could do. Yeah. Someone later should have said,
hey, buddy, why don't you go back to your mama's basement?
Right.
Afterward, he came up to me and said, oh, you were hilarious. Oh, geez.
Some of that, though, isn't it, from having stage time? I think I heard Carson say this one time, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said more or less is, you know, some of the lines that he would do, and I think this applies to all comedians, is it might not be the right time, but it's really about that recall of having a line that works at that moment, which makes it even a hell of a lot more funny then, right? So, yeah. So you got your chops that way.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about, because you were a school teacher, how did you come up with the persona or your stage personality? This is a branding for entertainers podcast, so it's really important that we talk a little bit about branding, and absolutely it all ties together with you as a person and how you came to be as far as your persona, your onstage persona.
Right. And that was the one thing that worried me when I said yes to doing this podcast, because it's about branding, and yet I've put very little thought into my comedy career when it comes to branding. I've basically let it carry me rather than me carrying it. Yes, a lot of my initial material was about being a teacher, but they weren't real, honest jokes. They were jokes like, there were a lot of death threats, and the parents didn't like me making them, but there weren't. I loved my students, they loved me, and that's not funny.
Right.
So it wasn't authentic. And then being dirty in the nightclubs, that wasn't authentic. So I guess if you have to say, what is my branding? Through all these years of trial and error, it just has so happened that my branding is clean, uplifting, positive, smart humor.
I think there are people that listen to the podcast that feel like they have to, what you initially thought, I have to go this direction and do this to be this. And God, that's such an uncomfortable feeling.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when you find out you and who you are, because you're living the brand. So to back up, you said you really didn't give much thought to the branding, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, true, because you're at a really good point. You're actually living your brand, right?
Yeah.
Because your on-stage persona, because you're not a character. I mean, a character is in a, especially like a clown or anything like that.
Right, yeah.
You're really just living the brand pretty much on stage as you would be off stage, I would imagine. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think so. And also you talk about a lot of people are afraid to start. And you do have to be able to face your fears, or I would have never been able to go to a war zone,
I bet.
A war zone twice.
Wow.
Yeah, or going to Africa. I'd never been to Africa. And even my black friends said, "Why are you going? Don't go there. They will kidnap you and turn you into a sex slave." And I'm going, and the downside is...
If nothing else, I have another career path that I might be...
But here's the thing. I never wanted to cost my husband with my choice. I didn't want his paycheck to support my dream. And so I never, ever took any money, even though I'm making nothing as an opener or making nothing, very little as a feature act. I would sleep in my car at rest stops or in Walmart parking lots on the nights when they don't give you a hotel, because they don't give you a hotel on the nights that you're not performing. And if I'm driving all over America or flying and getting a rental car, where are you going to stay when you don't have a gig? I slept in my car. And that's just what I did. I put my coat over me so that it wasn't quite so obvious that I was a woman. And I'm lucky that I started late in life rather than in my 20s, because my daughter was all grown up. I didn't have to worry about leaving a child. I have good credit. I have a car that works. I perform in lots of casinos, but I don't bet. I perform in lots of bars, but I don't drink, really. It's not that I refuse to drink, but it's not like it's important to me. So my money goes into supporting myself, not supporting a habit.
Sure. Sounds like you do a lot of corporate work.
Yes, I do.
So I would guess it'd be the same with comedians. There's money in that end of that market.
There's 10 times more money.
Right.
10 times.
10 times. Wow.
As a comedian headlining a comedy club, I never headlined in any comedy club anywhere across America where they paid me more than $200 per show and a hotel room. They don't pay your flight there. They don't pay anything else. Well, maybe some bar food. That's it. Whereas corporate, I can stay home, perform in the Pacific Northwest where I don't have to take a flight or get a hotel, but I could if I wanted. And they will pay me $1,000 or $2,000 for the very same show.
Big difference between markets, huh?
Yeah. Another comedian, I was talking to him about it. I was headlining in a club and he wanted a guest set, and we were talking backstage, and I told him what I just told you. And he goes, "Yeah, but I don't want to be what was the word he said? He didn't want to give in and do corporate. Like it's a bad thing to give in to do what you weren't really meant to do." And for him, maybe that's true.
Right.
But
for you,
but for me, it was the perfect fit.
Yeah, it's always nice when somebody tells you, right, that, well, why would you do that?
Yeah, that's
right?
that's giving up. No, it wasn't. It's actually finding my perfect niche. Yeah.
So one of the questions that I was actually dying to ask Sharon was, do you think that age had anything to do with where you're at right now? Did it have an impact on you as an entertainer? And was it better to wait as you were older, or in hindsight, do you wish you would have started when you were younger? This is what she had to say.
At least when I started 16 years ago, I don't know what they would say now, but 16 years ago, they didn't know how old I was. My open mic buddies, the people I came to know. And I think they assumed that I was in my late 30s, early 40s. And they treated me kind of like I was one of them, maybe an older sister. They didn't know I was 50. Mm. And they openly talked about the other comedians in Portland who had been doing it for 20, 25 years and doing well in their craft, but talked about them because they were old and really put them down because of how old and how hack they were. And so I never wanted to tell anyone my real age.
How old you were, right? Yeah,
right.
Sure.
So on stage, I'm portraying, I never lied about my age, but I never came clean and said how old I was. And I portrayed myself sometimes as divorced and dating, even though I've been married now for 42 years. I don't know. So I guess it doesn't matter what people think about your age, your type of comedy. It matters what you think.
Sure. And you get that a lot, even on the magic side, you get that. Usually the ones that are talking the most are the ones that are doing less.
Yeah, right.
And I would assume it's the same with
Yeah,
the
I think that's what I have found.
So,
yeah.
But yeah. Is there anything that you wanted to maybe talk about that my audience might be interested in, whether that's to come see you at a show, or if you have anything that... for sale or anything like that, anything you want to talk about? You've been so gracious as a guest.
I've written a book called A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to Dementia, a stand-up comedian's race against time. But it's now out of print after 3 years, and so I don't really have that to sell. I just wanted to mention it because I wrote a book.
That's great.
No, but what I do sell is I make these little bracelets that have a charm on them that say laugh or love. And I sell them for $5 each, and 100% of the $5 goes directly to helping children and elderly in Uganda, Africa. I don't keep a penny for myself. Every penny of every $5 bracelet goes to helping children and elderly in Africa.
Great.
And I've raised quite a bit of money, $5 at a time.
That's awesome. Can my listeners, is that something they could get from your website?
Sure, they could just look on my website, which is www.sharonlaceycomedy.com.
Okay. And I'll put that in the show notes as well.
Okay,
so they have
thanks.
That.
Yeah.
They'll have that available.
Yeah.
So, but I got to go back to the book thing, because you just teased us with the book, and it's out of print. Do you have any desire to get it back out there again, or is there anywhere the story's told other than a book? Or,
I kept a blog for a long time on my website, and a lot of what's in the book is also on the website. So
it is there.
Some of it is there.
They go to your website, because I think that can be very encouraging for people.
Yeah.
Especially when you look at it and you think, yeah, that was you, but that could never happen to me, right? And it's like, I think it's really, that's another reason I do this podcast. I think it's so important to hear those stories because, we're all human, and anything could happen to any of us. So it's really interesting to hear those kind of things, and maybe there's somebody out there that has a parent or some sort of relative or somebody they live with that might be going through a little bit of dementia. Talk to us a little bit about that real quick.
The number one thing I would say, if you have someone in your life who has dementia, is to don't quiz them. Don't say, "Grandma, do you remember me? Who am I, Grandma? Who am I?" Yeah, if they don't remember, they don't remember, and it just makes them
feel worse.
Yes, it stresses them out. So whatever stage they're in, if they're telling you something 20 times in the space of 5 minutes, they've told you the same thing 20 times, then you just humor them and act like it's the first time you've heard it, and let them tell it, because obviously it's important to them. Yeah, and if all they can remember is stuff from when they're 7 years old, then talk to them about that stuff.
Sure.
And if they don't know who you are, then maybe they know that you're the nice person. They think you're somebody nice. Well, then be that somebody nice for them.
That's great. That's great advice. We'll leave on that note, actually. How's that?
That sounds good.
And speaking of nice, thank you for being so nice. my listeners don't know, but I'm going to throw it out there that you drove like an hour and a half to get here to Seattle because I thought, how big can Seattle be? I forgot how big Seattle was. I've been locked up for a year, you know. I haven't traveled. So. Actually, I'm going to bring it back around. I have one other thing that I want to insert in there. And I don't want to get off on a downer with COVID, but how did you deal with that during the whole year?
Yeah,
you were doing shows and then boom, bottom fell out everything.
I had tons of shows every month for the whole year lined up and lost every single one of them. And so I used that time. I used that time, one, to try to write new material, which I wasn't that successful at, but I tried. But I also, my focus on my motivational speaking is to turn your challenges into opportunities. Well, if anything's not a challenge, COVID is a challenge.
Yes.
And so I used it as an opportunity to learn something new. I taught myself how to knit from a YouTube tutorial.
Wow.
Now, I can't knit sweaters or socks or gloves, but I knit these little blankets, little tiny blankets, and I went to the dollar store and bought a whole bunch of dollar stuffed animals, stuffed puppies. They were cute, fuzzy, warm puppies. And I knit the blankets for the puppies and put a little bow around it and put them in a big basket and take it to the Abused Children's Center.
Oh, wow. Very nice.
And so children are often taken out of their homes, like maybe in the middle of the night, and they don't get to take anything with them, their favorite toy or anything. And now they'll have that puppy in a blanket so they can take care of that puppy.
That's very cool.
That was my number one learning from COVID. Turn that challenge into an opportunity.
And that gave you an opportunity where it wasn't, what was me? Right?
Yeah, right.
You decided to take and help somebody else in the process.
Yeah.
That's very, very cool. So it didn't give you an opportunity to get depressed about not doing shows.
Right.
That's great.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank
I really
you.
Appreciate it.
I hope some of your listeners will contact me, even if they just have
Absolutely.
a question or want to say hi.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, my friends, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Branding for Entertainers podcast. I want to thank my guest once again, Sharon Lacey. And I want to leave you with something so dynamic that she said as I was editing. And it's so important that you listen to, and it is this: turn your challenges into opportunities. And I'm going to cry if I don't wrap this up, but I want you to really think about that and think about, as an entertainer, just how much power you have to reach people right where you're at. I'm getting emotional, I'm sorry. But really, seriously, you have that power and you can do it. I leave you with this, and we'll talk next time on another episode of Branding for Entertainers.